Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Tim Moen Show. Government's inflating your money. We have central banking. We have fiat currency. We have all sorts of fuckery happening up top that is eroding your buying power, stealing your wealth, robbing you, making it difficult, controlling you. Been part of a freedom convoy lately, chump? Well, we're going to have to cut off your ability to engage in commerce. Hey, social credit score, not where we want, not following the status quo. Sorry, going to have to get in line or you're not going to be able to buy anything. All these are ways that the government controls us. And of course, cryptocurrency is possibly the answer to exit the system and find a way. Now, I had Max Freeman on the other day talking about why Epic Cash is the cryptocurrency that we should be adopting. He outlined some problems with Bitcoin. No, says my next guest. Epic Cash is a latecomer. Bitcoin is king. So we're going to find out from Harry Cooper why we should stick with Bitcoin. Harry, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. What is the case for Bitcoin?
So I've been thinking about this a lot since watching your Epic Cash conversation. There's two kind of aspects that I want to cover. One is from like first principles thinking, and then the other one is from more technologically speaking. Because much of what Max's case was about was like why Epic Cash technically is better than Bitcoin. But before we even get into that, I really think thinking about it from like first principles is pretty important. What I was getting from that conversation was it's not grasping what the bigger picture is right now, like what the actual situation is in reality. If you zoom out and just look at what's going on, we have Bitcoin, which came out, as you know, the first cryptocurrency. It took a long time to get to where it is. Mm-hmm. And it's currently can be ranked amongst fiat currencies, like national currencies. I think at its highest point, it was within the top 10, maybe, or between like 10 and 15. And if you rank currencies by their value, by their market cap, I guess.
Right.
Right now, I think it's around, let me just check here. It's around 28th. So like Bitcoin is on the main center stage right now. And then something like Epic Cash that Max was talking about has a market cap of $17 million or $19 million. That's like a drop in the bucket. It's like a science experiment. So to me, if you understand how important the battle of Bitcoin is and why it's significant, you'll understand why getting something like Epic Coin and most other cryptocurrencies are a distraction. It's useful that I'm happy that there's development going on, that people are trying to figure out better ways to handle things, which come with their own criticisms that I have for them. But like Max's interest in privacy is great. And there's lots of things there's still lots of development to happen. But to me, Bitcoin is the way that we win this war. There's anything else, you are actively hindering Bitcoin's potential to lead to, I guess, what's the short way to say it? The bright orange future is what Bitcoiners call it, but it's
right. We don't like saying that in Alberta because that implies the NDP.
Oh dear God.
Over. Okay, listen. So I guess the way I look at it, money gets its utility from being widely accepted, I guess, right? And that is, among its other properties, being able to be easily divisible, easily transmissible, holding its value, not being easily counterfeited and having its buying power erased as a result. All those things are kind of the utility function of money and what makes it valuable as money. So to me, it's like, okay, there's ultimately going to be the market's probably going to trend towards like one currency essentially. It's not like other commodities necessarily, because I mean, that there are going to be other forms of currency probably, but there's probably going to be like one standard. And so to me, it does seem natural that Bitcoin would be that standard. But what about all these technical issues with Bitcoin? There was the privacy issue. I suppose there's ways of overcoming that. But what about the transaction costs? How do we overcome transaction costs?
Okay, so this is the technical side, which I was going to push to later, but we can dig
Okay,
into
well,
it right now.
we can go into it later. Let's
Okay,
stick
let's
with
come
your
back to that
sure.
because when it gets into technicals, then like I am a software developer. I'm not an expert in everything
Right.
to do with cryptocurrencies. When there's thousands coming up, you can't dig into every single one and look into it. But anyways, it just
Yeah.
becomes quite a lot of jargon and terminology that's difficult to talk about. I just wanted to talk specifically to start off with just from first principles. What is money? What is the innovation of Bitcoin? Why is that a big deal?
Yeah.
Why are people so excited about it? The big thing for me as a libertarian, finding Bitcoin and realizing what its potential is it turned me from a grumpy, nihilistic libertarian into an
Yeah.
optimistic one. And you'll never
Nice.
find more optimistic people that are liberty minded than in the Bitcoin community.
Hmm.
It's like, that's one of my favorite parts about it is the pure optimism. So, what is it that causes that optimism is what I want to get into first.
All
So,
right.
uh, to think of Bitcoin as digital money to me is a distraction. The fact that it's digital is beside the point. Digital is just a means to an end. What humanity and society has needed throughout time is a absolute scarcity that they can use as money. In the past, we've used many things as money, as you probably know. They've used beads, they've used stones, they've used all kinds of things. And the people who chose to use the wrong money uh, or a bad money, one that can be printed, one that's not scarce, ended up suffering to the people who chose a better money.
Right.
Um, would you agree, before I go too far with this, that money is at its essence is a ledger?
Hmm. I don't know about that. I'd have to think about that. I guess. Um, uh, well, I mean, it's bits of transmissible material that is valuable because it's finite and it can be transferred around. But yeah, I guess ultimately, paper money, for example, denoted uh, when it was sound money, let's say, it denoted a quantity of gold in storage that you could go exchange that note for. And so essentially, um, I guess there would be a ledger um, that associated that banknote with the gold and storage. So, um, for the sake of going along with it without thinking too much about it, okay, let's call it a ledger. Sure,
Okay, yeah, it's just nice to think of it in its like simplest terms so that we can really
sure,
picture what a ledger is all about. Um, so every single ledger we've ever used in the past was not an absolute scarcity, including, I'll say, gold. Gold, we still don't know exactly how much gold exists.
right,
They've just recently found a ton of gold in, I think it was Uganda. I think the majority of gold has been mined since 1950. If you hold on to gold at the current inflation rate, which is 1% to 2% per year, so they're still mining it out of the ground, your gold as like a fraction, um, it has a half life of around, I think, 40 years. So if you have 1/10 of all the gold now, then in uh, 40 years, you'll have 1/20th of all the gold because they're still
right,
mining it. So Bitcoin's big breakthrough, in my opinion, is that we have the first, not necessarily the only, but the first money that has an absolute scarcity. It's very transparent. This ledger, everyone knows everyone's playing by the same game, and they know it's going to 21 million. That 21 million will happen in around 2140, the year 2140, and then there's no more.
right,
So to me, that part of it is huge. Thinking about what impact having a absolutely scarce money will have on humanity is a big fascinating question. And then the other side of it is it's the first time we have a property that cannot be taken theoretically by violence. Um, it leaves the physical realm.
Hmm.
No amount of guns can take it because it's information that can be stored in your head depending on how you manage it. It's
Right.
essentially unconfiscatable, unseizable. And that gives every individual who stores wealth in this thing that doesn't need, like, as you know, the government is a protection racket. That's basically how it came about, is that people needed to protect their property. Well, now we have a type of property that does not need um, it does not need violence or guns to defend it. You can
Right.
shoot someone in the head, but you can't take their Bitcoin after you've done that.
Hmm.
So those are the two things that are huge to me for why Bitcoin has made so many people extremely optimistic about the future, is the ramifications of those two things: an absolute scarcity and something that is unconfiscatable. So uh, maybe we should go in for like just a little bit to talk about why that is a big deal for humanity. Um,
Sure.
okay, I'm just going to look at my notes here quickly. I mean, I guess the easiest way to look at it is what happens when someone has a unique authority over printing money. Suppose, in its simplest form, uh, if you are using Harry Coin and I can print Harry Coin, then you can see quickly how I can just print money to make you work for me while all
Right.
the while diluting your savings. Um, and then in a way, like, it's a bit hyperbolic, but you're my slave at that point. If I control your money, then then I control you if you're forced to use that money. Um, so now we have a money that no one gets this exceptional ability to print. And anyone who has obtained Bitcoin, Bitcoin has unforgeable costliness. So no one can obtain Bitcoin without experiencing some cost, sacrificing something. So there's an opportunity cost that is associated with obtaining the Bitcoin. Um, and as we can see with the government right now, they have no opportunity cost in spending their fiat money um, because they print it. So they don't
Hmm.
suffer for their bad decisions. So they can finance whatever garbage they want. And in my this sorry, it's such a deep topic. There's so many like different things, angles that I want to go at.
Sure.
But like, money is in its essence voting power in a peaceful society. When you
Right.
earn money, you get this voting power that you then get to spend in a way that influences other people in a peaceful way.
Right.
Um, so instead of you getting to earn your money and spend that voting power as you see fit, the government prints voting power and spends it around and funds like all of the garbage that I don't need to get into
Yeah,
listing because
no, that's a really good
you're too
point.
aware.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, the purest democracy is a marketplace, right? Because your opinion is actually backed by action. It's not just it's backed by personal responsibility. Let's say that personal
Mhm.
responsibility is, I've gone out and I've earned this money. I've gotten it through peaceful means, and now I'm exerting that opinion through my money by sending a signal into the surrounding community or marketplace about where my values truly lie, what I'm willing to exchange my energy, my life force for. And the more life force or value I'm willing to exchange, I mean, of course, the more the stronger that signal should be, and the more seriously it should be taken. And you make a great point by saying, look, if government can just print this stuff out of thin air and use it, then it's essentially, uh, you know, diluting true democracy in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I think that leads well to the next point, which is, yeah, the idea of money printing. So we've got this ledger that's got an absolute scarcity to it. Now we got to think about money printing. So part of Bitcoin coming along is it's this new way to have this ledger. And you can think of money printing in two ways. You can either add entries or add units to the ledger you're using, or you create a new ledger. Both of them are forms of money printing.
Mm.
With Bitcoin, I tell my friends, Bitcoin is for people who want to end money printing. Cryptocurrency is for people who want to be the new money printers.
Mm.
And that's what's happening right now. So if I create my
Wait a
own,
second. Isn't Bitcoin a cryptocurrency?
technically, yes. It's a very debated, contentious topic.
Okay, gotcha.
When Bitcoiners talk about cryptocurrency, normally it's a separate thing because there's Bitcoin and there's crypto. The best way that I could think of to describe it is, you could say gold is just a metal, or humans are just animals, but they're exceptional different things that you shouldn't really bucket them all together.
Gotcha. Okay.
But it's mainly Bitcoin being the first to create this ledger that's very important to it, and looking at how that ledger propagated, like who got access to it. For a lot of cryptocurrencies, there's a pre-mine, so whoever created it was like, here, I'll just give myself 30% of this ledger, and then I'll let other people start getting it. So that they're really just the temptation to print money is irresistible throughout time, and cryptocurrency outside of Bitcoin, to me, is just a continuation of that trend. Okay, so we have this. Let's say we have infinitely many absolutely scarce ledgers, because
Right.
that's essentially what we have now. We
Gotcha.
have Bitcoin is one. We have Epic Cash. They've created another. Theoretically, it's debatable whether they're actually scarce when you look at the technical side of it. But anyways, let's assume that we do. Now we have the question, which I think we've not really had to face this question throughout time, and now we really, really have to face this question: is you have to choose a ledger. Right now, we're used to the ledger being imposed upon us by
Right.
force and violence.
This is a ledger you will use.
Yeah, you must use
Or
the
else.
Canadian ledger because you must pay tax, and if you're a business, you must accept this currency. So now there's an important question. We have these other ledgers that we can use that are clearly better because they are finite, and only an irrational person would choose a ledger that is not finite. So which one do you choose?
Right.
And as you mentioned, money is a network good. So its value is derived from the size of its network. You could have the best technically sound money that in the world, but if no one uses it, it is not effective. So, sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
So the network size is kind of what determines its value.
Yeah.
Or its utility, right? And I value money that has some utility in terms of being able to be accepted and transmitted to
exactly
a variety of endpoints. So
yeah, and so for anyone who's chosen, like I've chosen the Bitcoin ledger, anyone new who starts choosing to use that ledger benefits me. And I also believe that it benefits them to choose the ledger with the most people on it. Also, as long as the ledger is absolutely scarce and no one has central control over it, it's beneficial to them to choose that ledger because it's like a sound ledger, as opposed to choosing a ledger where like Vitalik Buterin gets to print a whole bunch of it and he can control the ledger. That's not in that person's best interest. So also, for anyone who has chosen to use the Bitcoin ledger, any new ledger is a competition. There's no getting around it. They can say, oh, we're all in this fight together as cryptocurrencies. No. If you are introducing a new ledger and trying to recruit people to use that ledger, you are taking away from the people who could choose Bitcoin to use as a ledger. Of course, a fundamental part of my reasoning here, or my belief here, is that I genuinely think humanity will be better off if everyone is using a single ledger. There's a kind of derogatory term, Bitcoin maximalism. Some people consider it derogatory, others don't. It was actually created by Vitalik Buterin, who created Ethereum. The more I've been thinking about it, the more I think the essence of it is actually that it's people who are single ledger maximalists. They want to use one ledger and they see other ledgers as um, as competition and as trying to take away from the value of their own ledger.
Right.
So, like in Max's case, he definitely owns a much bigger percentage of the Epic Cash ledger than what he could ever obtain in Bitcoin. So there's a huge incentive to get other people onto that ledger,
Right.
but not necessarily at the people who join in, not at their benefit. It's more so to do with the people who create the ledger. That's not to say that I'm trying to criticize Max. I think he's quite an intelligent person from what I can tell, and he was quite well informed about a number of the issues. I just think it's coming at it from the wrong perspective. So that's kind of, I think, the first principles look at why Bitcoin, why Bitcoin's so important, and
Right.
then why it's so important to choose one ledger, and why we see new ledgers as competition
Right.
that are not good, and
Right.
why they're
Right.
attacked. Yeah.
Well, that makes some sense to me. I mean, you kind of want one ledger to be the predominant ledger, because that's going to make, central banking ultimately go away. And it makes some sense that maybe that one ledger is Bitcoin, because essentially Bitcoin was the first mover in this space and has the biggest network by far right now in terms of the cryptocurrency. And is that essentially a good summary of your case? Like,
I
is
think
it
so.
Bitcoin because essentially Bitcoin's the first mover? Like, had Epic Cash come out first, would you be
Yes.
making the same argument in favor of Epic Cash right now?
Yes.
Right.
But then we will get into the technicals where I would
Okay.
criticize a number of Epic's decisions. One
Sure.
other thing I want to mention there is when you think about the ethics of the creating that ledger, that's also very important. It's like, should someone be able, if they invent it, should they get 50% of the supply on a ledger that's meant to be the global currency of the world? And in Bitcoin's case, when it came out, no one knew anything about cryptocurrency. It was a science experiment at that point. This genius Satoshi put all these things together and presented a paper open to anyone. He wanted as many people as possible to like look at this and play with it and stuff. Whatever Bitcoin that went to Satoshi has not moved since it started. It's worth billions of dollars. It's Satoshi's treasure, and it's
Right.
there for anyone to see. But whoever this person is, they didn't touch it. So there's a lot of reason to think that is kind of the fairest type of ledger. And at this point, it's grown enough so that anyone who's trying to get Bitcoin either has to mine, which is extremely expensive, or they've held on to it for a really long time, which is also incredibly difficult given its price swings.
Right.
So yeah, that kind of sums up the first principle side of it.
Okay.
So
well, let's talk about the technical issues that were raised about Bitcoin. How do we overcome those?
Sure.
The one that sticks out for me is the transaction costs.
Sure. So an important question is, why is Bitcoin why does it only do 7 transactions per second? Visa does 10,000 transactions per second. And there's no way in hell that you can ever buy coffee. If everyone in the world is buying a coffee and they're using Bitcoin, there's no way that they will all be able to fit into that. You can't even do 1 transaction per year per person. So it's not even close. But the reality is, when you start looking at what this technology is no blockchain technology that's a distributed ledger. In terms of how it works, you have to have this ledger on many computers in order for it to be distributed and for people to verify who owns what, and that it's like following the proper rules. It's impossible at this point, given our current tools, to have 10,000 transactions per second. Coming to terms with that is a huge reason that I came to terms with why Bitcoin was the way it was. Like, they could double the block size, they could triple the block size, they could quadruple it, and along with the downsides of doing that, it still wouldn't handle
all the
Visa scale volume.
Right.
So I would say any cryptocurrency that is arguing that they can do that is either it's not decentralized, uh, or it's just lying. Like
Hmm.
you, Visa has massive servers for a reason. It's because it's difficult to. It would be extremely difficult to handle that many transactions, especially when you're trying to synchronize it across the planet. Um, so does that kind of answer your question before
Well,
we get into
sure,
why
sure.
it made the choices?
Well, I guess the question I have then is, if Bitcoin can't handle that many transactions, how is it useful as money? Like, how do we use it then? And how do we deal with such an expensive transaction cost?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Currently, using it as a store, like as a way of just saving your savings, it works quite well.
Right.
I've done a number of transactions on the base chain, and I have only spent like pennies, or often it's free because of the way that the exchanges will batch the transactions. Bigger picture, though, uh, as the global adoption increases, people are not going to be touching the base chain.
Mm,
It's there's I don't think it's possible. Like even if we wanted to, it's just not feasible for any cryptocurrency to handle the entire world using the
right.
base chain. Because again, the base chain is the ledger that needs to be replicated thousands or millions of times to make it as part of making it a reliable ledger. So what has
So
happened? Sorry,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, no, go
Uh,
ahead. I think you were going
Yeah.
to answer
So
my question.
what has happened is they're looking at how can we still handle like coffee transactions, but still settle to Bitcoin at the end of the day. And
Right.
so what's been created there is the Lightning Network, which essentially, like, there's a lot of technical things behind it, but you create these channels between, say, I create a channel with you, and then it has a balance of, say we have $20. We'll just use dollars as our currency. $20 in it, um, where like you own 10 and I own 10. Well, if I want to send you a coffee, I just say I'll send you $1. Now you have 11, I have 9, and it's actually like uh, using these signed transactions that don't go on the chain. Um, we can we can do that without ever updating the ledger. But we know that if we ever want to leave our channel, we can settle to the base
Oh,
chain.
okay. Gonna have to settle to the base change.
So
Gotcha. Okay. So let me try to is that what tokens are, by the way? When they talk about
no,
tokens? Okay.
no,
That's
I
something
don't think
different.
so.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, so let me try to get this analogy straight then. So it'd be like having the ledger might be analogous to like gold bricks or something like that, or a bunch of gold. It's just not useful to use them for everyday transactions. Um, but what we do is we go out and we keep we have a bunch of IOUs essentially that we exchange back and forth. We go back to uh, the bank, so to speak, where the gold is at, and we can settle up there when we want to exit. And
exactly.
yeah,
The big thing is, though, it's not just IOUs. It's like IOUs that Bitcoin, the ledger, speaks. It's like a programming language
right,
that
they're
says,
enforcing contracts,
yeah,
so no fuckery can happen. No one can
yeah,
inflate the amount of paper, which is what's happening in the gold markets, by the way, right now. Is
yeah,
um,
absolutely.
you got a note that says exchangeable for a certain amount of gold, but thousand other people have that same note. Well, there's only 1 ounce of gold. How can that be split? How can there be enough for 1,000 people, right? But of course, crypto solves that problem by making it um, essentially enforceable contracts or self-resolving or whatever. It uses the laws of physics that in such a way that it can't be fucked with. So that's fair.
Yeah,
Probably,
exactly.
yeah, probably saying it in an awkward way. Okay. All
Yeah,
right. So we essentially have this. We're not using the Bitcoin. Um, uh, you know, essentially Bitcoin almost becomes like the gold standard, right? Where you have paper that you use in your day-to-day transactions, but you still have this gold sitting back in a vault that you don't have to. That's just cumbersome to use, but it's still backed by that. But it's backed in a way that is bulletproof, that can't be fucked with.
yes.
Okay.
Um, and I I want to paint an accurate picture for these things that I'm describing. To me, even so, base chain, I don't think anyone will touch in the future, like other than geeky people like myself. But the average person is not going to touch it. Lightning Network, even creating channels, is an involved process. Involved. It's not a simple thing. It's not trivial. At least at this point. Hopefully, it will get better. But you have to manage like the liquidity. So I need to make sure that I have enough inbound liquidity. So if people want to send me $100 worth of Bitcoin, I have enough channels open that I can get that money in. So there's actually a lot that still goes on there. So that's kind of on the critical side of it. On the positive side of it, you have things like Noster, which is a new decentralized Twitter. And in Noster, instead of just liking a post, you can what they call zap. You can zap people, and you hit this lightning bolt. It creates a lightning invoice, and you can send them like 5 cents in a completely permissionless way, and that's just a very exciting thing to experience. So for geeky people, Lightning Network is really exciting, and they can use it today. People are using it today, and
How
they're
do you spell
sending.
Nostr? I'm trying to look it up here.
So it's Nostr.
Nostr. Okay.
Yeah, like Nostradamus.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just a protocol. So one of the most popular apps for it is called Damus, Damus. It's being backed quite a lot by Jack Dorsey, who was the founder of Twitter.
Interesting. Oh, I'm gonna have to check that out later. Cool. Look at all the things we're learning here, guys.
I got goosebumps when this one guy just said, anyone who replies, I'll send them 1,000 sats, which is a sat is like the smallest unit of Bitcoin. And yeah, I replied, and then I just got a notification, you just got 1,000 sats, which is like incredible. Like that was without any intermediary. I was using a custodial Lightning wallet, so I was not managing the channels or anything. But then as soon as I got it to the custodial wallet, I could send it to my non-custodial wallet because it's all on the Lightning Network. So it's all following this protocol. And even if you do trust someone to manage a lot of it, the fact that you can withdraw it at the end of the day in a split second, I think will really change things. I think a really important point too is engineering is always about trade-offs.
Right.
Like I'm trying not to just paint a picture of like, oh, it's perfect. It can handle like if 9 billion people started trying to use Bitcoin today, it would be a clusterfuck. And we're not ready for that. The fact that it's kind of gradually grows and gets more engineers interested with these hype cycles is like part of what's needed to get it ready to handle. Like we didn't have the Lightning Network in 2016. It was only introduced in 2017, I think. So this kind of like gradual adoption is good in the sense that we need a lot more infrastructure. Because the kind of the worst case scenario, the worst case of if Bitcoin becomes globally adopted too fast is that the infrastructure that's decentralized and follows good practices is not ready. And instead you have centralized things that can make the user interface really nice because they manage everything.
Yeah.
But then you have so much counterparty risk. You have situations like FTX and all of that shit show, Mt. Gox and whatnot. So yeah, I just really wanted to paint that picture that like Bitcoin in no way is perfect. It's not these like money given by God that will solve everything, but it solves very specific problems that are massive problems that we've had throughout time.
Right. Right. And it eliminates the huge glaring problems of central bank and government controlled currency. What is your take on how we get there, so to speak? How do we get Bitcoin more widely adopted?
That's a good question. It's the golden question. I think the curious people who are liberty focused are kind of gradually finding Bitcoin because it's just so clearly aligned. And actually, one of the saddest things I think is seeing how many there are a lot of libertarians who just don't want to accept, like they almost fight against Bitcoin because of its popularity. I think we're so used to being the underdog, like we're like this little thing, but money, it just doesn't work that way. We can't just choose our own little unique niche currency.
Yeah.
and we'll suffer for that decision, and that's really important. But I think it's happening. Like, it's just a matter of what can control the speed at which it happens. Um, I don't know if it needs much more help than what its current rate has been. The fact that within, what was it, 12 years, it became worth $1 trillion, uh, without a marketing team, without anything, like,
Yeah.
just the incentives of people who use Bitcoin and how much it benefits the people who decide to use it, I think will gradually um, just win people over, especially as they see the realities of, like, it's an economic reality that if you choose the US dollar, you're going to suffer because it's being printed. And if you choose Bitcoin, you're going to benefit because it becomes scarcer over time. So that economic reality, through curiosity or pain, I think will teach people. Um, yeah, there's going to be a point where it's just not an option anymore. You're just going to be like, people are going to know, like, oh, you have this paper money that someone printed, and they won't accept it. And then people will say, oh, I need this thing. And fuck, it's
Right.
hard to
Right.
get it because it's real money.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh, what do you think the just to give, maybe address the issue of that some of my audience might have, who might not be super familiar with crypto or Bitcoin. They look at, I look at a lot of my coworkers, for example, at the fire station, and they jump in on different cryptos, and it's all about speculation, right? It's not necessarily, I don't think too many of them understand the revolutionary aspect of Bitcoin. They just see the markets going up and down,
yeah.
and they kind of jump in and out, and that's great, good, play with it, I guess. But other people look at that and go, holy shit, it was up at 70,000 and now it's down to 28, and it's all over the map. Like, how are you going to advise me to get into this thing that swings so wildly? What's your response to that?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I don't even like to advise people to get into it. I advise them to try to understand what's happening.
Right.
Um, like, yeah, I feel almost dirty if people who I don't think understand what's going on buy it because I say something about it. It's like, that's because they're just going to see the price tank someday, and then they're going to leave it, and or they're going to sell it when they make $100. Like, um,
Right.
so yeah, let me think about that.
Well, here's another question. I mean, I think that's a good way to look at it. Like, don't advise people to get in, or certainly don't speculate with it. Look, I tried to get $100 worth when back when it was less than $5 a coin, and I wish I would have tried harder. At that time, you could only get it from MT Gox or privately, and to get it from MT Gox, I had to open a US account and wire money, and that seemed like too much of a pain in the ass for $100 worth of something. But where was I going with this? Oh, but here's the thing. Like, I was looking into this stuff way back when, and I was convinced and optimistic, same as you. There's so much technical stuff I don't know about it. I'm not where I need to be when it comes to understanding things like custodianship and protecting it and keeping a piece of paper with that 23-digit character in a safe or whatever. I certainly am not, don't pay enough attention to it to speculate on it and trade it and watch it go up and down. I do think it is the future of where money's going to, and I think inevitably I'm going to have to use it. And at a certain point, having some cursory knowledge and some useful knowledge of how it works is going to give me an advantage in the marketplace. Um, where can I go to learn about this stuff and play with it? Like, what are some basics I should know about owning and using Bitcoin if I just want to play with it, get used to it? And people will have heard all the stories, right? That, oh, you're going to lose all your money. Like, people are just going to take it from you. They're going to steal it from you. Like, look at the FTX can, look at Mount Gox, look at all these areas, and maybe talk a little bit about some of the basics. If we're going to get into Bitcoin, we're not ready to go whole hog and start investing in this stuff and using it as currency day to day, but we do want to be prepared, and we want to be able to start dabbling in it and doing it in a safe way and in a way that prepares us for the coming apocalypse, let's say, what are some things we should know, or basic things?
That's a really good question that I don't think I have a wonderful answer to. Um, like I could recommend specific services or YouTube channels. It's such a
Or like even rather than that, what are some basic things like, um, talk a little bit about the difference between keeping your money on a server versus personal custodianship or something like that.
Sure. Okay, so the fundamental way that Bitcoin works is if you to know is to own in crypto world. So uh, it's all about who knows specific zeros and ones, and if you know the zeros and ones, if you know this information, then you have access to this specific Bitcoin. So obviously, if access to Bitcoin comes down to 24 words, obviously if those words are on a computer that touches the internet, that's a huge risk. If you have think about if you have your life savings uh, with 24 words on your computer, how much do you trust that no one's spying on your computer or
Yeah.
that there's not a hack? Um, and then likewise with centralized custody, um, you have the amount of trust you put in someone then to handle those 24 words. Like, who are you going to trust to have to handle properly the 24 words that controls your savings?
Right.
So really, they're like, the way that I handle it, you can generate. So the word thing, really, it's just 24 words that represent zeros and ones. And it's words, you use words because it's easier to remember words and to not make mistakes in writing them out. And yeah, it's really tricky to make recommendations because if it gets too technical, it just becomes like painful. And
Right.
if you're not like that kind of person, you probably won't enjoy it. So maybe the best thing to recommend is just start watching some YouTube channels, go down what they call the rabbit hole, see why, just try to understand why some people treat Bitcoin like a religion. It's like their highest, most important value that they think is going to fix the world, and try to just understand that point of view. And then I think that will incentivize, because managing the Bitcoin stuff is not an enjoyable process, in
Sure.
my opinion. It's really something that you do, just like protecting your gold is not enjoyable. Like, you don't enjoy buying a safe and
Yeah.
all of that stuff, or like figuring out how to verify that your gold is real. Um, it's really it's really the benefit that comes to you through learning the custody, and how much power do you have, or how enabling is it that if you as a person can store like $50,000, $100,000 in your head, and you can cross borders with that money in your head that no one can touch.
Right.
That's the thing that incentivizes going through the pain to figure out how to manage it.
Well, and I think, the trucker convoy, for an example, opened a lot of people's eyes into how easy it is for them to control government money and to control your ability to operate in the economy, uh, to shut down your access to bank accounts, to shut down access to your own money, um, all those things. And that doesn't even touch on the things that libertarians have been harping on for years, which is using government fiat erodes your buying power. Government fiat is a way of the government basically sending artificial signals into the market that you know suck your buying power away, destroy your freedom, destroy all these things. And this is the answer to those problems. And so, um, it is a pain in the ass to learn how to, just like eating a healthy diet is a pain in the ass, going to the gym on a regular basis is a pain in the ass. But if you want freedom in the future, if you want more choices available to you in the future, you got to make a little sacrifice today. You got to eat healthier today. You got to, you know, suffer some pain today in the gym so that you don't break down and are a cripple tomorrow under your own body weight. And so you're right. I think this is a way to do that. Harry, I've kept you for 45 minutes. Is there any last words? I mean, you basically sold me. I think I agree with you that Bitcoin is probably going to be the gold standard, let's say, of the crypto world, of digital currency in the future. And I'm not totally convinced that there's not room for other cryptocurrencies. I think there definitely might be some use for others, given some of the technical issues with the gold standard. And we could maybe eventually have a debate between you and the Epic guys about what where that utility or non-utility lies. Any last words though for our guests before we go?
Sure. I have, well, there's like a few other things that I really did want to mention.
Sure. Okay, let's go.
So one thing back to that, other cryptocurrencies could offer value. If that's the case, I would argue that what they should do instead of printing their new ledger is have a way that you can go from Bitcoin to their new technology. If their technology is better, I can send my Bitcoin to, like, there's ways, it's still programmatic money. So I can send it to a way that says this Bitcoin is never spendable again because I'm turning it into this other thing. Then they're not benefiting from being the money printers. That's where I take the biggest issue is people keep trying to be money printers. So that's one point. The other thing, the cycles. You're talking about your firefighter buddies, like they see it like goes up like crazy, drops like crazy, goes up like crazy. I think that experience, people will realize that there's a pattern here, which is what happened to me. Like I studied and read about Bitcoin in 2015. I didn't buy any. Then it like went up like crazy. I'm like, oh, I missed out on that. And then it crashed. And then I'm like, okay, it's just like volatile. And then it went up again and then it goes down. And then eventually I was like, okay, I need to figure out what's going on because it keeps going higher every time that it goes through these cycles. So I'm like, I need to just lick my wounds, except I didn't buy it when it was cheaper. And because otherwise I'm gonna suffer again. Because if it keeps doing this, I'm gonna be like, fuck, like now it's a million. And I just did not pay attention to it. So I think that's a big part of it is just understanding that there's a pattern there and realizing like, yes, it goes up like crazy, it goes down like crazy. It's because it's a free market money, and it's not hard to understand why once it starts going up a lot, people start leveraging and getting in trouble, and then it crashes. So just coming to terms with that. And then the last two things, just trying to like shoot through these bullet points.
Sure.
You mentioned you felt like you were too late in that podcast about Epic Cash. To me, if you think it's too late, you don't understand the point of a sound money, because a sound money, you're never too late. It benefits people to use a sound money forever.
Right.
The value of it will always go up over time as everything else gets produced more. So we have production of more things, and the supply of what you have is either static or going down. So there's no such thing as too late. You could be too early, or you could benefit from being early, but it's like being too late to electricity or too late to the automobile. Like it's just silly. It's a tool that really cures problems that we have.
Well, you could be too late to profit scandalously from something.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, which is kind of what I was referring to.
And then the last point was about energy. And I think this is very, very, very important for Bitcoin. The use of energy is the whole point of how Bitcoin's ledger becomes a decentralized thing that no one can fuck with.
Right.
The whole reason that mining happens is it adds energy to the more energy that happens on top of a transaction you make. If I send you Bitcoin, the more energy that's on top of it, the harder it is to undo that transaction. It's what ties Bitcoin to the real world, to the physical world. Like if I give you gold, the only thing that gives you possession of it is the amount of energy it would take for someone else to take it from you. Right. And so Bitcoin, when you mine blocks on top of the transactions, that makes it harder to ever undo one of those transactions. So the energy is a feature of Bitcoin. It's what ties it to the real world. And you never ever, if you find something that's not using energy, then it's completely changing. It's I would be very careful to just assume that that's fine. Having a faster block time too is a bit of a misleading idea, because if the block, if you get 10 blocks in the time that Bitcoin takes to do one block, but each of your blocks only uses a tenth of the energy, then there's no difference in the transaction finality. It's all about how much energy that has been put on the top of that transaction to make it irreversible. And then in terms of I know that you're probably not too concerned about the energy use being a waste, but it's actually Bitcoin miners are just consumers of last resort of energy. They only want to consume energy that no one has demand for, because if there is demand for it, then they are not profitable. So they need
Oh,
to
yeah.
find energy that no one's interested in. So yeah, that was my last point.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are all good points. I'll have to think about that energy thing. Yeah, it kind of makes
That's
sense.
another rabbit hole. The whole
Yeah,
Bitcoin energy.
and I think I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I mean, in one sense, it's almost a method of like energy arbitrage or something like that, right? It's like getting energy to where it's most in demand and that sort of thing. But
Exactly.
yeah, interesting. Thank you so much, Harry, for coming on, reaching out to me. If you want to be like Harry, you have an issue with something someone said on this podcast, come at me, bro. I might have you on the show, just like I did with Harry here. And, if you have an interest in debating one of my guests, by all means, I'm happy to host a pugilistic round or two on the old debate square. So thanks for listening, guys. As usual, you can support me at locals.com, or guess what? I just started a, what's that thing? I don't want to say Subscribe Star. It's not it. Substack. I started a Substack. So I'm going to be getting that going by the time this podcast is out. Hopefully that'll be in full swing. You can support me there. Thank you so much, Harry, and peace out. We'll talk to you guys later.